So what do you do if you need to talk to the police, but it's not an emergency? What other resources do you have to contact law enforcement outside of 911? So for some of us, we would think that this is something that we would just naturally know how to do. Maybe you need to report a crime, but it's not an emergency. Maybe you need to talk to an officer about something. Maybe you've got a question. So departments have a non-emergency number, and you can actually do a search, a web search for, police non-emergency number for that town. Sometimes you have a centralized dispatch. I come from more of a rural part of the United States where there's typically a smaller population, and we have a centralized dispatch, which means that all of our calls, when you call in, go through a centralized dispatch. And so that's actually, because of that, budgetarily we wouldn't be able to do it otherwise. But you get to centralized dispatch, and then the same way that when you call 911 and you have an emergency and you get fire, EMS, whether it's an ambulance you need or whatever, you can call a centralized dispatch, or you can call dispatch for that city. You have a non-emergency, but maybe you need to talk to a fire marshal, or you don't have an emergency, but you need to talk to an officer because you have a question. Because some people literally just drive around. I've been on duty. So I'm a police officer and a police chaplain. I've been on duty and had people like driving around town going, man, it is so hard just to find a cop in this town. There's somebody over there breaking the law. So call it in. If it's an emergency, call 911. But a lot of people don't realize that, or they think, especially with smaller departments, they don't realize that there's not somebody sitting in that department there just simply to take your phone call. It's going to go to a centralized dispatch because you actually want that officer out patrolling. And so if you've got a non-emergency and you need to talk to an officer, they will call you back when they're not dealing with an emergency. And so there's some information that you have. And I've literally dealt with situations where people are afraid to call in because they're afraid somehow that they'll get in trouble. And I've people in their 40s and 50s even that are afraid to call into a centralized dispatch to a non-emergency number because they're afraid they're going to get in trouble for asking a question. I don't understand why, but it's a very common fear. So don't be afraid of that. And a lot of officers that I know, it can be frustrating when you get a lot of questions back to back can be frustrating. But a lot of people just don't know their rights. They don't understand what makes something a civil matter. They don't understand, and that'd be another good video to do. The officer said it was a civil matter. That would be another good video to do. So you've got a lot of different things that you might need to contact law enforcement for, and you need an answer to a question. And then you can actually do a search for state law in your area. I'm located in Missouri, and you can do a search for state law in your area for your state, obviously, and they call them RSMO numbers in our state. And you're looking something up. Like somebody asked me yesterday, they're like, so if this thing is wrong with my car, is it illegal to drive that way? And I could find no information on it being illegal, and we talked about it and kind of reasoned it out, and I said, I don't see why it would be illegal. Do you want to fix that? Yes, but it's not illegal to drive that way. So when you have a question that you need answered, or you have a concern, you can call the non-emergency number in your area. This is also a way to contact if you're outside of your area. So let's say that there's an emergency at your house, but you're not home. So your Ring doorbell goes off. If you dial 911 and you're out of state or outside of your city, they'll have to figure out how to route that call, and you're going to lose minutes in time as they're trying to route that call. They'll actually have to call the non-emergency number for where you are. So if you save the non-emergency number, that'd be another good video talking about contacting when there's an emergency, but the emergency is outside of where you are. I'm trying to think how to word that in a video. But I was talking to a lady the other day that she was dealing with an emergency at her house, but she was out of state. And so she called 911, but she was in one state, and it took them like 20 minutes to figure out how to route everything through. Because I know this doesn't really make sense, but there's not this central switchboard that you just go to and go click, click, and then you're talking to law enforcement if you're law enforcement somewhere else. You've got to look things up and get routed to the right people. And it just takes time. And I said, if you will save in your phone, do a web search for it, find the number. Once you find the number for non-emergency in your area, then turn around and take that save it in your phone as a contact, non-emergency for this county, non-emergency for this city. I do it, and I've done it for years, long before I was in law enforcement. I saved the non-emergency numbers because if you're driving down the road and you see a piece of debris or you see something going on that isn't perhaps an emergency at this specific second, it's a great way to contact law enforcement for something that is not a life-threatening, emergency. And you can actually be in some areas. That's the one caveat to what I said earlier about why people kind of freak out. If you repeatedly call 911 for non-emergencies, you can actually be cited in some areas, given a citation and fined for abuse or misuse of 911. But that takes effort. I mean, the only times I've ever seen that is like somebody that's calling, 15, 20 times a day, and a lot of times they have a mental illness, or they've got some axe to grind, and they just keep calling in. It's a waste of resources, because if somebody can't get through that's having a legitimate emergency. So look up the non-emergency number for that police department or sheriff's department in your area and save it in your phone. And so that would be the answer to the question, how do you contact police when it's not an emergency? So God bless. Take care.